Hey everybody, hope you're doing well. I want to offer some words of encouragement today, and it's going to be a little different. I have some other things I want to say that I'm going to say later in the week, but we're going to jump between several passages, and I just want you to hear a piece of them. These are all passages that are for this week from the lectionary. This week is the week we celebrate Pentecost. And so I want you to hear a few of these passages. When the day of Pentecost had come, they were all together in one place. And suddenly from heaven there came a sound like the rush of a violent wind, and it filled the entire house where they were sitting. Divided tongues as of fire appeared among them, and a tongue rested on each of them, and all of them were filled with the Holy Spirit, and began to speak in other languages, as the Spirit gave them ability. Now there were devout Jews from every nation under heaven living in Jerusalem. And at this sound the crowd gathered and was bewildered, because each one heard them speaking in the native language of each. Now, a little bit further down in the same passage, how is it that we hear, each of us, in our own native language? Parthians, Medes, Elamites, residents of Mesopotamia, Judea and Cappadocia, Pontus and Asia, Phrygia and Pamphylia, Egypt and the parts of Libya belonging to Cyrene, and visitors from Rome, both Jews and proselytes, Cretans and Arabs, in our own language, we hear them speaking about God's deeds of power. This is from Numbers 11. So Moses went out and told the people the words of the Lord, and he gathered 70 elders, placed them all around the tent. And the Lord came down in the cloud and spoke to him, and took some of the Spirit that was on him and put it on the 70 elders. And when the Spirit rested upon them, they prophesied. 2 men remained in the camp, one named Eldad, the other named Medad. And the Spirit rested on them, and they were among those registered, but they had not gone out to the tent. So they prophesied in the camp, and a young man ran and told Moses, Eldad and Medad are prophesying in the camp. And Joshua, son of Nun, the assistant of Moses, one of the chosen men, said, My Lord Moses, stop them. Now, hear these words from 1 Corinthians. No one can say Jesus is Lord except by the Holy Spirit. Now, there are a variety of gifts, but the same Spirit. There are a variety of services, but the same Lord. There are varieties of activities, but it is the same God who activates all of them in everyone. To each is given the manifestation of the Spirit for the common good. This week's readings are all about language, about prophesying, about the Spirit. In them we see these different things. Joshua is offended that someone besides Moses is prophesying. Like, wait, isn't that what you do? You're the special guy. You're Moses. Why are these two just nobodies in the camp? Why are they prophesying? In Corinthians, it talks about all the gifts that are given by the Spirit to further the kingdom. There's lots of gifts, but they're all given for this one purpose, this one good cause. And at Pentecost, the Spirit comes and rests on the disciples so that people can hear the good news in their native tongues. And if you keep reading in that passage, eventually Peter promises the gift of prophecy will be given to all people, not just him, not just those few disciples. young men, old men, your daughters, everyone. What Pentecost is at its core, it is the reversing of the idea of the Tower of Babel. Right? The Tower of Babel, we see language as a dividing factor. Like some people can't speak the same language and it divides people. But here at Pentecost, we have this reversed. No longer should people be divided by language. No longer should one group of people be seen as above the others. No longer should some be called special and others not. No, this is the undoing of tribalism, right? We're no longer stuck in our tribes, whether that's by language or culture or place of origin. It's the undoing of tribalism. No longer will there be this group over here and that group over here. They are all a part of God's kingdom. I think this is a word for our time. And all of these passages together point to a wisdom that we desperately need. And that wisdom is this: there is a distinct beauty to all peoples. I want you to notice something in that passage in Acts. The Spirit comes, all these people hear it, they come running in, there's Peter and the disciples, and they're speaking. And notice, the people that come didn't all suddenly hear one language they could understand. Right? It wasn't that Peter is speaking some language that now everyone here kind of magically can hear. Rather, they all had their own language spoke to them. Right? They heard it in their own native tongue. Later in the passage, they have the coming of the age of the Spirit, which is for everyone. Daughters will be prophesying. Old men and young men, right? Old men will dream dreams. Your young men will prophesy. Old men will dream dreams. Notice, it's not saying these people aren't different, right? There's old men. There's young men. There's daughters. Trust me, there is a difference between being a young man and getting older. There is a difference. But that Spirit and those gifts and all the things that are given are for everyone. It doesn't change that she is a daughter. It doesn't change that he is a young man. It doesn't change that you are an old man. It gives it to all as they are. You look in the passage in Corinthians and suddenly there's this gifts that are given. And they're different gifts, right? There's speaking in tongues, interpretation of tongues. There's prophesying. There's gifts of giving. There's all these different gifts. And Paul makes it clear there are lots of different gifts, but they all serve one purpose. One cause. These languages, these skin tones, these cultures are not pushed aside and called ugly and horrible and let's all get on this one train of this one language and this one way of doing things. No. These cultures, these skin tones, these languages are beautiful. One language isn't better than the other. One skin tone isn't more beautiful. One culture isn't supreme. The Spirit comes and gives gifts where people are. This week, with the death of George Floyd and the events that have followed, we see the exact opposite of the beauty that is portrayed in this chapter of Acts. We see what happens when our differences are not seen as beautiful, but as something that marks us, something that makes us suspicious, something that causes fear or hate. What Acts is trying to say is that we are better than that. That we're created better than that. That we've been recreated better than that. Yes, we see the differences. People that say, oh, I don't see differences, I don't see color. No, we're not colorblind. When you watch that video of George Floyd, you have no doubt he's black. It is not that we don't see the differences, but that those differences don't drive us apart. Rather, the differences are what pulls us together. Just as there are numerous gifts, but they serve one purpose. There are a myriad of skin tones and cultures and language, and we get to choose whether they tear us apart, whether they make us enemies, whether we hunker down in our tribe, or we choose to see the beauty. Oscar Romero was a Catholic priest and bishop in El Salvador. He was assassinated in 1980 while performing Mass. This was because he was standing up for the poor and downtrodden of his country and standing up against the government, which was committing massive human rights violations, hurting people, killing people, torturing people. In the movie that was made about his life, Raul Julia plays Romero. And there's a scene in the movie that haunts me. And I've thought about it several times this week. Romero is in prison. Now, he's not being harmed. It's more of a threat. But there's other people there who are. And so while he is in a cell, he can hear down the hall the guards have taken someone into a room, a political prisoner, and they are torturing that person. And you can hear that person's screams of agony. And while they scream, the camera focuses on Romero. And Romero, through the bars of his cell, begins screaming. And what he is screaming is this: we are people! We are people! We are people! We are people! Trying to get the guards to see the humanity of everyone in that building. When I watched George Floyd beg for his life and say I can't breathe. When I watched him beg for his mom, I could hear Romero's voice. We are people. We are people. We're all different. We all have different skin tones. We're all good at different things. We think differently. We are all people. We are people. We must remind one another of the beauty of all people.